So, hi, this is Jim, and this is Inside Trek World. And yeah, you may be wondering, who is this guy on the screen and where did Jim go? I just figured it was time for a yearly refresh. So I shaved everything off and let it grow back in. And just to prove to you guys that I do, in fact, have clothes other than a black polo that says Trek World. Here's my Joe Bob Halloween hoedown from Shudder a couple years back. Joe Bob Briggs. It's been a guilty pleasure of mine since Monster Vision back in the 1990s. Anyhow, let's talk Trek a little bit here. Um, Looking at myself in the mirror a few moments ago upstairs, I laughed with myself about how, yeah, that'll make a good thing about asking them, who is this person or what did you do with Jim? And I said, yeah, because if you look at this person, there's no Star Trek in him, at least not visibly. And that got me thinking. And this is a tough one. You really, really want to think about this one because there are no flippant answers here. This is a philosophical question, I bet, that no one's ever asked you before. But let's give it a go, shall we? Who would you be without Star Trek? Let me say that again because it's pretty heavy if you think about it. Who would you be without Star Trek? Now, let me explain to you where I'm coming from. Although I have a feeling the vast majority of you automatically know the message that I'm honing in on. Um, I was raised like a lot of people from a broken family. My father was an alcoholic. So my childhood, well, let's just say that it was eventful and not always pleasant. My mother did everything she could to take care of me, and I give her sole credit for me being alive and kicking today through some of the things that she had to go through. Um, but in 1972, I saw an episode of Star Trek called Devil in the Dark, and it touched something in me that I think runs through a lot of us, and that is things aren't always what they appear to be. That, the devil in the dark turns out to be a creature trying to protect his children, but it looks like a monster to us, look through the lens of humanity versus a lens that takes into account, I guess, xenobiology is what it'd be called today. So that changed my life in an instant, right? Because one, it got me interested in science fiction in general, which launched me into Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, um, Donaldson, I think, Norman Spinrad, Lester Del Rey. All the names go on and on and on. I'm sure you've all read them at some point or another in your life. And an astounding number of people that I've met over the years will also say that, oh, so and so was a role model. And I never really considered that before. But I can tell you from the hindsight of being, at the end, closer to the end than I am to the beginning of my adventures, that James T. Kirk was definitely a father figure to me. He was never meant to be. And you have to admit that most of the things, that he would do occasionally would be things you wouldn't necessarily want to emulate. Okay. However, he was passionate and he was inherently good. And those are two traits that I hope I've been able to then pass on to others. I grew up and I got involved in computers. Probably would not have become involved in computers in the 1970s of all time had it not been for Star Trek and a love for science fiction. So that ended up being my career field. Um, Ironically, I can tell you my career field prior to that moment, without going into details about what it had been there was no doubt in my mind, the mind of my mom and everybody who knew me, what I was going to be. And it didn't happen that way. Better or worse? Who knows? Maybe in a different career field, I would have affected lives differently than I do today talking to you on this channel. But the result is, no matter what, the gym that sits in front of you here would have been a very different gym had it not been for Star Trek. Would I have latched on to Space 1999 and Star Wars and all the other things? I don't think so. Um, Star Trek was my gateway drug to science fiction, for lack of a better word. And I think had it not been for Star Trek, I would not have even gone out and tried or known to try to read some of the things that I did and to follow up on information that I did. I would probably have turned out very much like everyone that I went to school with, who they grew up and became whatever the family business was, whatever they liked in school that they wanted to do. But no one in my graduating class, in my opinion, had their future decided the way mine was when I first got involved as a Star Trek fan. So leave comments below, share this. This is really something I'd love to see a million comments on, because I think that while some of us would say, oh, if I hadn't been a Star Trek fan, I would be this. Maybe you went into medical research because of Star Trek. Okay. Remove Star Trek, what would you have gone into? I think that the majority of us, with a little bit of thought, can realize just how quickly life can go off the rails between where you are now and where you could have been. And recognizing that Star Trek put me on a path that brought me to this camera, talking with you and interacting with my patrons and viewers on a regular basis now for several years, all a result of one summer afternoon when I watched an episode of a brand new show I'd never heard of before. Wasn't brand new to the world, but it was brand new to me. Um, I think that's about it. I promised I'd keep these lies, so I'm not going to edit out any mistakes or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sure I talk to anything. But anyhow, put in the comments. I love to hear who you believe you would have been. And the interesting part, of course, is, what would you have been, who you would have been, and how is that different from now? If you're one of the people who inherently believe that your positive traits come out no matter what, then you may have a different career field, but everything else stays the same. Let me throw this last thing out to you. Early 1990s. I'm not seeing anybody regularly at all. A friend of mine recommends that I begin the dating scene. Oh my God. We've all been there before. Imagine being there as a Trekkie in the 1990s. It was not a whole lot better than it was in the 1970s and 80s, trust me. Um, so my wife I met as a direct result of this friend pushing me. Get out of the corner, come over here. This is ridiculous. Go meet people, see people. That friend sent me in this direction. How did I make friends with that person? Star Trek. I'm not even 100% sure where and when he and I met the first time, but he was my convention buddy. He drove. I was his convention buddy. He drove. I sat in the passenger seat and slept on most of the way over there. But to the October treks, all the Hunt Valley treks, the trek conventions that were up in Westchester, Pennsylvania, all those things in there, creation conventions and stuff. He was my trek buddy. And had it not been for him, I would not have met my wife, and I would not have my son today. And if it weren't for Star Trek, I wouldn't have met him. So think about that and leave your stories in the comments. I can't wait to hear them. Live long and prosper.